What happens when a billionaire thinks he can humiliate a janitor in Arabic, speaking in a language she couldn't possibly understand? Well, let's just say he's about to learn that assumptions can be dangerously wrong. This is the story of Elena Rodriguez, and how one moment of arrogance changed everything. The marble floors of Manhattan's most exclusive private members club, the Sterling, gleamed under crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. It was past midnight, and the after-hours gathering was in full swing. The club's upper floor had been reserved for Victor Blackstone's birthday celebration, a man whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations. At 58, Victor had built his empire on Middle Eastern oil partnerships, Gulf state investments, and a ruthless ability to crush anyone who stood in his way. Elena Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, her rubber-soled shoes silent against the polished stone. At 28, she had the kind of quiet beauty that went unnoticed in rooms like these. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her navy cleaning uniform bore the subtle scars of countless nights spent scrubbing away the excesses of the wealthy. She moved with practiced efficiency, invisible to the power brokers who frequented these halls. Tonight was different, though. Elena's phone had been buzzing in her pocket all evening with calls from the hospital. Her 7-year-old daughter, Sophia, had been admitted with pneumonia, and the bills were already piling up. Elena's ex-husband had disappeared 2 years ago, leaving her to raise Sophia alone on a janitor's salary. Every dollar mattered, and tonight's overtime pay would help cover the prescription costs. She paused outside the main dining room, checking her watch. The party inside was loud, filled with laughter and the clink of expensive glasses. Through the slightly open door, she could see Victor Blackstone holding court at the head of a long mahogany table. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his custom Italian suit impeccable. Around him sat a collection of Manhattan's elite: hedge fund managers, tech moguls, politicians, and socialites whose names regularly graced gossip columns. Elena took a deep breath and knocked softly on the door frame. The club's policy was clear. Cleaning staff were to work around guests as unobtrusively as possible. She'd done this hundreds of times before, slipping in and out of rooms like a ghost while the wealthy conducted their business. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the conversation. "I just need to empty the trash bins." Most of the guests didn't even glance her way, but Victor's eyes locked onto her immediately. There was something predatory in his gaze, the look of a man who enjoyed asserting his dominance over those he deemed beneath him. Well, Victor said, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Look what we have here. The help wants to interrupt our conversation." A woman in a glittering gold dress, recognizable as socialite Madison Crawford, laughed sharply. "Really, Victor? Can't they do this when we're not here?" Elena felt her cheeks burn, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I'll come back later." "Oh no." Victor stood up, swirling the cognac in his crystal snifter. "Don't leave on our account. We're just discussing some business deals. Nothing a cleaning lady would understand anyway." The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Elena noticed a few guests shifting in their seats, clearly uncomfortable with Victor's tone, but none spoke up. She began moving toward the nearest trash bin, hoping to finish quickly and leave. "You know what fascinates me about people like her?" Victor continued, his voice getting louder. He switched to fluent Arabic, his accent polished from years of business dealings in Dubai and Riyadh. "They come here thinking they're invisible, but they hear everything. Corporate secrets, personal scandals, merger discussions. Makes you wonder what they do with all that information." His guests looked around nervously. A tech billionaire named James Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Victor, maybe we should." No, I'm just getting started." Victor waved him off, still speaking in Arabic. "Look at her, pretending she doesn't understand. These people are always listening, always scheming. That's why I never trust the help. They're like insects, crawling around in the shadows." Elena's hands stilled on the trash bin. Her daughter's face flashed in her mind, lying in that hospital bed, asking when mommy would be back. The humiliation burned, but she needed this job. She needed the money. A woman at the far end of the table, Senator Patricia Wells, frowned. Victor, I don't think. She probably thinks we're discussing the weather. Victor laughed, getting bolder with each word. These immigrants, they pretend to work hard, but they're really just looking for handouts. Welfare, free healthcare, free education for their children. They drain the system dry while contributing nothing. The room had gone uncomfortably quiet. Even his most sycophantic friends were looking away, suddenly interested in their drinks. But Victor wasn't done. I bet she sends half her paycheck back to whatever third-world country she crawled out of. He continued in rapid Arabic, his voice dripping with contempt. Meanwhile, hard-working Americans like us foot the bill for her existence. It's pathetic, really. She should be grateful we even let her clean our floors. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she tied off the trash bag. 28 years of memories flooded back. Her childhood in a cramped apartment in Queens, watching her mother clean houses for 12 hours a day to put food on the table. Her father's calloused hands as he worked 3 jobs to save enough for Elena's education. The full scholarship to Columbia University that she'd earned through perfect grades and sleepless nights. But there were other memories too. Memories of dusty libraries in Cairo where she'd spent a summer studying Arabic literature. The professors at the American University who'd praised her linguistic abilities. The 2 years she'd spent in Dubai as a consultant, navigating complex business negotiations in flawless Arabic. The cultural immersion that had taught her not just the language, but the poetry, the nuances, the soul of the Arab world. The dreams she'd had to abandon when Sophia was born premature and the medical bills consumed everything. Her ex-husband's gambling addiction that had left them bankrupt. The corporate job she'd lost during the economic downturn, forcing her to take whatever work she could find to keep a roof over their heads. Victor was still talking, his Arabic becoming more vicious. People like her are a disease on society. They take our jobs, lower our wages, and then have the audacity to act like victims when we call them out on it. Someone should remind her that she's only here because we allow it. That's when Elena straightened up slowly and turned to face the table. Her dark eyes, usually soft and unassuming, now blazed with quiet fire. The room fell completely silent as she began to speak, her Arabic flowing like silk over steel, with the educated accent of someone who had studied classical literature and poetry. Mr. Blackstone, she said, her voice clear and unwavering, I want to thank you for the lesson in gratitude. You speak Arabic well for someone who learned it in boardrooms rather than from the heart. But perhaps you should learn this verse from Al-Mutanabi before you speak of others with such contempt. Victor's face went white, his cognac glass frozen halfway to his lips. The silence was so complete that Elena could hear the tick of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Elena continued, reciting classical Arabic poetry with perfect pronunciation and rhythm. The noble one is noble even if fate brings him low, and the base one remains base even if fate elevates him to the stars. But she wasn't finished. She switched to modern Arabic, her tone carrying the authority of someone who had spent years negotiating with CEOs in Dubai and Riyadh. I'm grateful that my education taught me to see through people like you, men who mistake wealth for wisdom, who confuse power with honor, who think that speaking another language gives them the right to dehumanize those they assume cannot understand. Senator Wells had set down her wine glass and was staring at Elena with dawning recognition. James Morrison was leaning forward, his eyes wide with amazement. I'm especially grateful, Elena continued in Arabic so eloquent that it made Victor's earlier comments sound crude by comparison, that my years working in the Middle East taught me the difference between those who truly understand Arab culture and those who simply exploit it for profit. Elena took a step closer to the table, her voice never rising above conversational level, but somehow commanding the attention of every person in the room. You want to know what I learned during my years as a consultant specializing in Gulf state partnerships? That men like you are usually the reason American businesses fail in the region. You see dollar signs where you should see culture, you hear business opportunities where you should hear poetry, you feel superiority where you should feel humility. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final blow in perfect classical Arabic. But please, don't let me interrupt your important business discussion. I'm sure you were about to share some profound insights about the intricacies of Islamic finance or the cultural nuances of doing business in the Emirates. After all, what would a simple cleaning lady know about international commerce? The silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 seconds. Finally, Senator Wells stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "My God!" she whispered, staring at Elena. "You're Elena Rodriguez. You're the woman who wrote the comprehensive analysis on Middle Eastern trade partnerships that influenced our foreign policy position 2 years ago." Elena nodded slightly, never taking her eyes off Victor. "I was a senior consultant specializing in Gulf state business relations before the recession, and my daughter's medical needs required me to prioritize stability over career advancement." James Morrison slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. "Jesus Christ, Elena Rodriguez. You were the translator for the Abu Dhabi summit. Every major corporation wanted your expertise on Arabic business culture. You're legendary in international consulting circles." Victor was still standing, swaying slightly, his face a mask of shock and growing horror. "This is impossible," he muttered. "You're a janitor. You clean floors." "I clean floors because I love my daughter more than I love my pride," Elena said simply, switching back to English. "It's an honest living that puts food on her table and medicine in her lungs. There's no shame in hard work, Mr. Blackstone. The shame is in looking down on people who do it." Madison Crawford, the socialite who had laughed earlier, was now staring at her manicured nails, her face flushed with embarrassment. Other guests were shifting uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their phones or their drinks. Elena began gathering her cleaning supplies. "I should let you get back to your party. I'm sure you have many important things to discuss. Perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on the recent developments in Islamic banking? Or maybe your insights into the cultural implications of the Abraham Accords on regional business relationships." Victor's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Everyone in the room knew that Elena was challenging him to demonstrate the kind of sophisticated knowledge she just displayed, and everyone could see that he was completely out of his depth. Dr. Sarah Chan, a venture capitalist who'd been quietly observing from the corner, stood up and walked over to Elena. "Ms. Rodriguez, I don't know if you remember me, but we met briefly at the Dubai International Business Forum 2 years ago. Your presentation on cross-cultural negotiation strategies was masterful." "Of course, Dr. Chen. It's good to see you again," Elena replied in Arabic, then switched to English with a gracious smile, as if they were meeting at a networking event rather than during her janitorial shift. Victor finally found his voice, but it came out as a strangled croak. "This is ridiculous. I don't care what degrees she has or where she worked. She's the help. She shouldn't even be in here while we're meeting." That's when Thomas Ashworth, one of the most powerful men in the room and Victor's longtime business partner, slowly rose from his chair. His voice was deadly quiet. "Victor, I think you should stop talking." But Victor was past the point of rational thought. His carefully constructed image was crumbling, and he was lashing out like a wounded animal. "Thomas, you can't be serious. She's nobody. A failed consultant who couldn't hack it in the real world. Now she's trying to make us look bad because she's bitter about her own failures." Elena set down her spray bottle and turned back to face Victor. For the first time since she'd started speaking, there was real fire in her eyes. "You want to talk about failure, Mr. Blackstone? Let's discuss the Al-Mansouri deal 3 years ago. The one where you ignored every cultural protocol I advised, insulted their negotiating team with your ignorance of basic Arabic etiquette, and cost your investors $400 million when they walked away from the partnership." Victor's face went ashen. That was a closely guarded secret, a catastrophic failure that had been blamed on market conditions rather than his cultural incompetence. Or perhaps, Elena continued in flawless Arabic, then translated to English for the room, "We should examine your company's ongoing difficulties in the Qatar market, where your reputation for cultural insensitivity has made you persona non grata among the business community there." Thomas Ashworth was now standing as well, his face grim. "Victor, we need to talk. Privately." But Elena wasn't finished. She turned to address the entire room, her voice calm but carrying an authority that made everyone lean forward to listen. I want to share something with all of you. Something I learned during my years working in the Middle East that might be relevant to this conversation. She moved to the center of the room, no longer the invisible cleaning lady, but commanding the space like the boardroom executive she'd once been. In Arab business culture, there's a concept called karama, dignity. It teaches that every person deserves respect regardless of their station in life. The most successful American companies in the region are those whose leaders understand this principle. She gestured toward Victor, who had slumped back into his chair. People like Mr. Blackstone represent everything that gives American business a bad reputation internationally. They mistake arrogance for confidence, ignorance for authority. They build partnerships on exploitation rather than mutual respect, and then wonder why they fail in global markets. Senator Wells was nodding along, clearly fascinated. What would you recommend for someone in Mr. Blackstone's position? Elena considered the question seriously. Honestly, he should step down. A CEO who holds such contempt for working people, who makes assumptions based on appearance and accent, who thinks speaking Arabic makes him superior to those he perceives as immigrants, that person lacks the cultural intelligence necessary to succeed in today's global economy. The room erupted in murmurs. This wasn't just a social embarrassment anymore. Elena was making a business case for Victor's removal based on his demonstrated incompetence in international relations. James Morrison leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Elena, are you still in consulting? I take freelance projects when my schedule allows, she replied. But my priority is my daughter. She needs stability. What if that stability came with flexibility? Remote work, project-based assignments, competitive compensation. Dr. Chun interjected. Elena felt a flutter of hope in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. I'd be interested in hearing more. Victor suddenly erupted from his chair, slamming his fist on the table. This is insane. You're all going to throw me under the bus for some janitor's sob story? Thomas, you've been my partner for 15 years. Thomas Ashworth looked at his longtime associate with something approaching disgust. Victor, in 15 years, I've watched you make increasingly poor decisions. Your judgment about people, about markets, about basic human decency, it's all been deteriorating. Tonight was just the final straw. You can't be serious. Our Middle Eastern partnerships are worth billions. Our partnerships, Thomas emphasized the word, will be worth a lot more when our Arab business associates don't have to worry about your next cultural insult. Your comments tonight, if they reached our partners in the Gulf, would destroy decades of relationship building. Elena had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. She'd come in here to empty trash cans and was somehow witnessing the dissolution of one of the most powerful business partnerships in international commerce. Madison Crawford, who had been silent for the past several minutes, suddenly spoke up. Victor, you should probably know that 3 people were live streaming tonight's party on their social media accounts. Your little speech in Arabic has already been viewed about 100,000 times. The color drained from Victor's face so quickly that Elena thought he might faint. In today's social media environment, racist comments from powerful executives could go viral in minutes and destroy careers within hours. Senator Wells was checking her phone, her expression grim. It's trending on multiple platforms. #BlackstoneRacist is gaining traction internationally. Dr. Chun was also scrolling through her phone. The business press has picked it up. Financial Times just posted an article titled, American CEO's Arabic Slur Threatens Middle East Business Relations. Elena felt a strange mix of emotions. She hadn't intended to destroy anyone's life. She'd simply defended herself against ignorance and prejudice. But she also knew that men like Victor rarely faced real consequences for their actions, especially when those actions damaged America's reputation abroad. Thomas stood up and addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we should call it a night. There will obviously be some significant changes at Blackstone Industries in the coming days, and I need to do damage control with our international partners and investors. As people began gathering their belongings, several approached Elena. Dr. Chun handed her a business card. I meant what I said about consulting opportunities. We desperately need someone with your expertise in Middle Eastern business culture. James Morrison was next. My company is expanding into the Gulf markets. We need someone who truly understands both the language and the culture, not just the business opportunity. Senator Wells stopped as well. Ms. Rodriguez, would you be interested in advising a Senate subcommittee on international trade relations? Your expertise could help shape our approach to Middle Eastern partnerships. Elena accepted each card graciously, but her mind was reeling. An hour ago, she'd been invisible, scrubbing floors and emptying trash. Now some of the most powerful people in the country were offering her career opportunities that could change her life. Victor remained slumped in his chair as the room emptied, staring at his phone screen with the glazed expression of a man watching his world collapse in real time. His company's stock had already dropped 15% in after-hours trading, and social media was buzzing with calls for boycotts of Blackstone Industries. As Elena gathered the last of her cleaning supplies, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see a young woman in an elegant black dress approaching hesitantly. Ms. Rodriguez? I'm Isabella Blackstone, Victor's daughter. Elena studied the girl's face. She couldn't be more than 24, with her father's sharp features but kind eyes that held none of his arrogance. Hello, Isabella. I wanted to apologize for my father's behavior tonight. What he said was inexcusable. The girl's voice was quiet but sincere. I also wanted you to know that not everyone in my family shares his views. Some of us have been trying to push for more culturally sensitive international policies for years. Elena nodded. I appreciate that. Your father's opinions are his own. They don't reflect on you. Actually, they do, Isabella said, her voice growing stronger. I'm on the board of directors at Blackstone Industries. I've been pushing for leadership changes for months, but I could never get enough support. Tonight changes everything. Elena looked at this young woman with new interest. What will you do? Call an emergency board meeting. Present a motion for my father's removal as CEO. After tonight's international embarrassment, I think I'll have the votes. Isabella paused, seeming to gather her courage. Ms. Rodriguez, would you consider joining our advisory board? We need voices like yours, people who truly understand international business culture, not just the profit margins. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. Advisory positions at major corporations came with substantial compensation and significant influence over company policy. It could solve Elena's financial problems while giving her a platform to create positive change in how American companies approached global partnerships. I'd need to know more about the company's current international practices and future cultural sensitivity initiatives, Elena said carefully. Of course, but I hope you'll consider it. We need to rebuild our reputation in the Middle East. And we need leaders who understand that business success requires cultural respect. As Isabella walked away, Elena found herself alone in the elegant dining room with her cleaning cart and the debris from the evening's drama. She began collecting glasses and plates, her mind racing with possibilities she'd never dared imagine. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia's nurse. She's sleeping peacefully. Fever's completely gone. She keeps asking for you and saying her mama is the smartest person in the world. Elena smiled for the first time all evening. Whatever opportunities arose from tonight, her daughter would always come first. But maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to choose between being a good mother and using the skills that had once made her one of the most sought-after consultants in international business. 3 weeks later, Elena sat in a corner office on the 42nd floor of the Blackstone Industries building, reviewing cultural sensitivity protocols for the company's upcoming expansion into the Emirates. The view of Central Park was spectacular, and the salary was more than she'd ever dreamed of earning. But the real satisfaction came from the policy changes they'd already implemented. Mandatory cultural training for all executives working in international markets, partnerships with cultural consultants from target regions, and a commitment to authentic relationship building rather than mere profit extraction. Victor Blackstone had resigned in disgrace, his political connections severed and his social standing destroyed. The racist comments had cost him not just his CEO position but several international partnerships worth billions of dollars. His name had become synonymous with the kind of cultural ignorance that American businesses could no longer afford in a global economy. Elena's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was the State Department, requesting her expertise for an upcoming trade mission to the Gulf states. As she hung up, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The little girl in the hospital bed was now healthy and enrolled in one of the city's best private schools, where she was learning Arabic as her second language. The woman who'd once scrubbed floors was now helping shape how America approached business relationships with one of the world's most important economic regions. But the most important change wasn't financial or professional. It was the knowledge that she'd stood up not just for herself, but for the principle that true success in international business requires genuine respect for other cultures and peoples. Sometimes the most powerful revolution begins with a single person refusing to let ignorance pass unchallenged. Sometimes justice comes not from the courts or the government, but from the simple act of speaking truth to power in a language the powerful never expected you to know. Elena Rodriguez had learned that lesson in a marble-floored room full of people who thought they owned the world. But she'd also learned something else. In America, sometimes the janitor understands international business better than the CEO. And sometimes that understanding is enough to change everything. Her daughter's latest drawing was taped to her computer monitor. A woman in a business suit shaking hands with people in traditional Arab dress, with the words "My hero mom builds bridges" written in both English and Arabic across the bottom. Elena smiled and got back to work. There were cultural protocols to develop, international relationships to nurture, and a better future to build. After all, someone had to clean up the mess that men like Victor Blackstone had made in America's reputation abroad. And Elena Rodriguez had always been very good at cleaning, whether it was floors or international relations.